Coming up, flash at the bottom of your screen, CBIC chairman exclusive. That's coming up in just a bit. It should start any moment. 1st July last year is when it has been implemented, and since the launch of GST or goods and services tax, there have been a lot of hue and cry how things are, what's happening. So that's something that one can look. Okay, let's not waste time and go across to the CBIC chairman. My colleague Ruchi Bhatia is speaking to him.
Last 15 months have been stormy and well challenging, but in a change like this, which is huge and affects the whole country, and the way you collect taxes, I think there would always be an agenda. So to call it unfinished, I'm not quite sure, but it is something which is in the making and it's work in progress. And like most of you would know, wherever GST has been rolled out, it always takes a couple of years or maybe a little more to actually settle down completely. I would say for the first year, it's not been bad at all. And one was actually worried about possible, hurdles of a kind which would become difficult to handle. We haven't faced that. We've been able to ride over and tide over a lot of the issues that did come up. And a lot of it is to do with the proactive way in which both the GST Council and government actually faced these issues.
Since we are talking about things that are left out, what happens to them? Are you looking at rate rationalization for a lot of products that are in the 28% category, items like cement, paint? There were a lot of talks about these items being brought to a lower category. Is that something that you're actively looking at?
I don't want to mention specific items, but let me say that 28% was trimmed down hugely after the Guwahati meet. And yes, if you're looking at 28% being only valid for high value sin goods, then there is definite scope. The question here is, as a good revenue officer, I'll have to think in terms of revenue, and I think we all need to be concerned about it because we're riding well so far. We've stabilized nicely, including rates. Now, to tamper with rates in a hurry, I think would not be appropriate. You need to look at the holistic picture. You should be assured that you're going to get the kind of revenue you're looking at, and then think in terms of trimming down.
In fact, you've led me to my next question, which is on GST collections. If you look at the collections for the month of March, that was the only month where we reached and hit the 1 lakh mark. More so, from November to April, we have seen between 83,000 to 94,000. Would you say the asking rate for GST is very high? Because that's what a lot of economists are saying.
See, I think if you look at what was expected, and if you looked at the way you'd kept the revenue neutrality, your expectations were very valid and fine. If you look at the way you've increased and expanded your tax base, you have a valid reason to expect that that base is going to contribute more revenue. And yes, definitely that peak in March was, I won't say peculiar, but it's a standard March phenomenon. Everybody wants to wrap up their accounts and sort things out. So definitely there was that 1 lakh crore. Since you said 1 lakh, I thought I'll just mention 1 lakh crore. But of course, we are moving in this direction. If you look at pre 1 lakh crore, you were looking at figures which were moving from 83 to 84,000 and then eventually 88 and 89,000. And immediately after that month, you're looking at 94,000. So what you need to compare is 89,000 with maybe 94,000. So that's a good climb. And as you go along and as you continue with your enforcement measures, which were on a low key in the beginning, catching up now, transitional credit being verified and cross-checked, definitely post all this as you go along, your auditing starting and then your scrutiny starting of the returns, all this and the e-way bill system coming in, I think a whole lot of factors that will contribute to the fact that I think the expectancy can definitely be hoped to be achieved.
Can you put a number to it? Or would you put a number to it?
I would prefer not to, because there is a target, and I think it's as revenue officers, even in pre-GST, there were targets that were put and you continuously tried to reach that. There must be very valid reasons why you cannot reach it, and by and large, society or the economy understands that there were some reasons which may be out of your hands. But as far as reaching the target is concerned, I think the department, whether it was the CBIC or the states, where everybody was focusing on settling of GST. processes, procedures, simplification, helping the trade, training, awareness programs. Focus was there. Focus is definitely now on revenue, and I think we need to be very circumspect and careful as we go along to ensure that nothing rocks the boat and we're only moving from a graph which is getting higher and higher.
Let me talk on the other hand, the concerns that the states have. We are seeing that there are many states, especially union territories like Daman and Diu, Dadar and Nagar Haveli, Puducherry, there the revenue shortfall is massive, between 74% to 49%. States like Himachal, Uttarakhand, Bihar, J&K, again we are seeing massive shortfall. Do you think, as center, firstly, how would you look to plug that shortfall? And somewhere down the line, do you believe that, the fact that there is still, after 1 year, a huge shortfall between what was expected and what the states are getting, that could be one of the reasons that the states are not willing to let go of their cash cows, like real estate, like alcohol, fuel?
Alcohol, as you know, is out of the GST. So yes, as far as fuel and other things are concerned, certainly. But I think, every state or union territory has to assess its own situation. It is your state, your assessees. So what went wrong, or did nothing go wrong, but there's a better way to manage this, I think is something that states have to look at themselves. And in almost every case, we've tried to showcase GST and make it as easy as possible. The question here is whether the industry in these particular states is coming on board. So in some cases, evasion has been there even pre-GST, it will be there even post. So the question is how well you plug that, how well you use your resources to ensure that people are on board, weaning them in and helping them and hand-holding them to make sure they're there. So I think there's something every state and UT will have to look at.
It's the state that is responsible for their own revenue shortfall and not the center in that case?
It depends. I mean, I won't blame it on them entirely, but I think as a state, you have to assess the kind of revenue you got pre-GST, what was expected of you now, and wherever the help, since the center is already providing a 5-year relief through compensation, this is a lead time for every state and UT to look into what they are doing, and you have to, I think, introspect and try, and I think every state and UT would want to be out of this dependency. So definitely people would be working towards this, and till then there's the cushion, so they know that.
It makes life easier for the center also.
And I don't believe that any state or union territory would not want to be independently getting the revenue they should, and in fact shrugging off the compensation if they could. So everybody would be working towards it.
Let me ask you another important issue, and since we are talking about it, the usual cash cows, the fact that crude prices have been very volatile, and key products like crude oil, petrol, diesel, natural gas, ATF, all out of the ambit of GST. Do you believe perhaps now is the right time for the center to ask states to ensure that these are brought under the ambit? I know Aviation Ministry has been pushing for getting ATF for a very long time.
As a matter of fact, the provisions in the law itself, in the CGST, has a specific provision for inclusion of these 5 petroleum products eventually in GST. I'm not quite sure about the timing, but eventually it should come. It's good because it provides input tax credit and therefore will eventually affect the consumer. So down the line you'll find that benefits do trickle down, so things should get cheaper. It's a good place to be, and it's definitely good to bring it on board. The question is the timing, because we are talking here exactly what you said, the comfort zone of the revenue and the high targets to meet, and then here you're looking at, at bringing these on board as well. So there's this fine balance you have to maintain between the revenue you will use.
Because you're saying timing, I mean, repeated requests by the center, whether it was the petroleum minister or whether it was the finance minister himself, they've fallen on deaf ears with respect to states. I mean, has the center in that sense been not been able to provide the required comfort to states, telling them that, well, hey, once we are able to get all these items, it will make life easier for you, it will make life easier for consumers, you will not be able to bear so much burden?
I wouldn't say it's fallen on deaf ears. I think centers are aware of what it's doing. Like I said, that's why the timing is so crucial. Everything has to go in a kind of sequential order. So you need to have your GST settled down well in terms of its policy, in terms of the processes, procedures. That's the comfort level for the trade. They need to be able to file, they need to be able to pay taxes, they need to be able to get their refunds on time. All this has to happen. The second one is the rates. You fix the rates, you tweak the rates. Now, I'm not saying there can't be another tweaking, but the question here is the balance between the revenue and what you need to get, what your target is, and what you're looking at. So there is scope for inclusion of all these. There is scope for reduction and rationalization of rates. But I think all of this has to come, one doesn't want to be blundering or kind of pushing forward just for the sake of doing it. It has to be a well thought out and considered decision, and the council will do so.
Let me also ask you about the sugar cess. The government, I know, has formed a committee. You've also reached out to the AG for his opinion. Where are things headed? I mean, the one view is that yes, sugarcane farmers are reeling under a lot of pressure. They need to be given some sort of a comfort. The centre has already provided them with a sugar package. On the other side, the issue remains that this is going to open a Pandora's box. Kerala has already said that if you give a cess for sugar, there needs to be a cess for rubber as well.
I think the concept of GST itself, when it was conceptualized, was an amalgamation or a merger of many taxes and cesses as well, with the focus being that you don't want to have cesses in the GST regime. But I think there's nothing, you should not close your doors, and you need to be flexible and open-minded as to whether you need to do something which is going to help the farmers. So this matter itself is before the group of ministers that was formed after the last GST Council meeting, and they are looking at options. I think we'll have to wait for the group of ministers report.
But aren't you concerned about distorting GST? I mean, that was one of the criticism that everybody had when we were talking about a 4-rate structure, when we spoke about rate rationalization, and now the moment you bring a cess, then again it distorts GST.
That's one of the major issues that probably has come up, where the feeling is that, don't touch the GST as such, the way it was conceptualized. But I think, as I said, one must not be negative or completely shut out anything which may be the correct solution. Here the question is, what are the options in front of you that can help the farmers? And of that, what would be the best option, taking into account everything? So, as I said, I think group of ministers will give their report. We'll wait for that, and let's see what they recommend.
Last time, is sugar cess a best option in this case?
I'd still say that I think we need to look at all options and then decide.
Okay, let me also ask you about return simplification. One good thing is that all new taxpayers are hailing the fact that you've decided to rework and redo the return simplification process, whether you have nil transactions or whether you are under the composition scheme. Only one return form has to be put out. What is the transition that you're looking at in terms of timeline? How are things looking at? Are we on track, on board?
Let's just say that a lot of thought has been gone into what kind of a format it should be, and the whole focus has been that it should get really simplified. It should be easy to use for people. So it took a lot of time, because you want information in that format which is important for you, so you can't leave out anything, and yet you need to put it in a way which is simple for people. That's a very tricky kind of a situation. But undoubtedly, having just one return is going to be the ultimate and the best way in which the trade can accept it as well. That is being worked on, and hopefully the final picture should come before the GST Council in the next meeting. And then, of course, once you've visualized and conceptualized it, you need somebody to now do the systemic part of it. I think that GSTN would have to look at what is a timeline to put this together.
While stamp duty is still out of the ambit of GST, the other issue is that the builders are not passing the benefit of ITC to consumers, to people who are looking at taking up their flats. And apart from that, there is a huge anomaly between ready to move in flats and the under construction flats. Is the government looking at this issue actively?
Yes, of course, it's an issue to be looked at. But let me also say that, this issue of not passing on, now this is of course of concern. It's not just in the real estate sector, but in any sector. That is why the National Anti-Profiteering Authority was created. And There are a number of complaints that have come to them. There are a lot of investigations going on, and definitely there will be orders passed, and people who are profiteering and not passing on will be brought to book.